Welcome to Engaging Graduate Prospects during COVID-19. My name is Kevin Bauman, and I am the Director of Philanthropic Initiatives here at Capture Higher Ed. And as much as I want to take the next half hour and commandeer it to talk about our advancement work, I know that you all tuned in to hear from our resident expert, Jack Klett, the Director of Graduate and Post-Traditional Initiatives here at Capture Higher Ed. So knowing that we have just 30 minutes today, Jack has packed a lot of great information into the next 30 minutes. So I'm going to do just a quick introduction, and you can see on your screen there, Jack has spent the last 20 years in the graduate admissions space, working in a number of different roles, and he's bringing all of that expertise into today's presentation. Because Jack, as I introduce you, let me start with the question. Did you ever think that you were going to be doing a webinar on this topic when you started 20 years ago?
I can assuredly say no.
I figured I'd start with the softball question to get you started. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me turn it over to Jack Klett.
Thank you, Kevin, and we'll have to get together and talk about advancement soon, no doubt. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I want to let you know and point out that there are a number of resources available to you outside of this webinar. You can access those on Capture's website just by clicking resources. A lot of blog content and also content from our podcast. We do a podcast every month called The Buzz, and we did an entire episode on maximizing virtual engagement during COVID-19 that took us through both undergraduate and graduate. But today we are focused on graduate.
You know, Jack, if I chime in real quick, as I remember, our first episode of The Buzz actually related to working from home and remote work. So anybody who is tuning into the COVID-19 resources that you see there, scroll back a little bit and maybe take a look at the Buzz episode related to working from home. With that one actually stars Jamie, our director of undergraduate as well.
Yeah, who also did a great webinar last week. So we provided a number of resources and continue to develop content the more we learn from our partners and the more we test strategies and tactics with our partners. But here is the thing when it comes to all of this. There are so many unknowns. Anyone who is saying this is precisely what is going to happen and when simply doesn't know. But that doesn't mean we are completely in the dark. There is information available that is helpful to us in the here and now. And to that end, by the time I stop talking, you will learn how institutions are responding and how that response is shaping the response of prospective graduate students. Additionally, you'll learn about the 4 key engagement strategies that we are recommending to graduate recruitment and enrollment teams. So I do want to go ahead and make it clear that there's a lot of content to cover. So let's just go ahead and dive in. So what do we know? What is that information that can help us now? Well, we know that the response, we know what the response has been among colleges and universities. We are seeing all of that play out in real time, and we'll discuss what we're seeing shortly because a lot of it is very promising. There is now no shortage of survey data that sheds light on how COVID-19 is impacting the decisions of enrolled students and prospective students. The Chronicle of Higher Education published an article last week that detailed the number of surveys available, as well as cautioning that some of the survey results vary significantly. So we should be sure to look at broad themes in the survey results. These surveys, along with the institution response, are helping to inform what the market response is. How is it that students are responding to the ways in which institutions are responding? And how are they responding in general based on the new normal that we find ourselves in? The response here, I think it's important to mention, it varies significantly. I spoke to a GEM director at a nationally ranked art school in Chicago, and she let me know that deposits for graduate study there are up 30% compared to this time last year. Now, she also noted that she has some real concerns about those numbers because so much of that increase comes from international students. And of course, we're seeing many examples of the opposite, where deposits and enrollment confirmations are down by double digits. So we will have to continue to monitor this and implement best practices as we move forward here. Finally, we have history as a bit of a guide. Now, the last pandemic to greatly impact America was the Great Influenza of 1918. So there isn't really much from a graduate enrollment perspective that we can rely on from that. But we do have the more recent Great Recession and 9/11 examples to draw from. And while imperfect examples, history tells us that we should anticipate a brief enrollment dip. But as we saw in these two cases, enrollment rebounded quite strongly afterward and followed with periods of pretty significant growth in the pursuit of graduate credentials. Not sure, no one is certain if that is what we will see here, but it does seem logical that the drivers for a graduate credential, especially in poor economic times, are likely to spur greater interest in graduate education. So let's take a look at how institutions are responding, looking first at the changes in admissions process. One of the more universal remedies is the extension of application and deposit deadlines. In some cases, deposits are being waived and are replaced with a formal intent to enroll form that can be submitted via email or that a student can log in to via portal. Basically, it's a way outside of requiring a monetary deposit to just get a formal declaration of one's enrollment confirmation on record. Applicants who are delaying plans to attend graduate school are asking and receiving refunds for associated application fees. Additionally, some institutions and programs are suspending application fees altogether during this time. My recommendation, if someone is indeed asking for an application fee waiver or an application fee refund, go ahead and provide it. The short hit that you'll take the short monetary hit that you would take would be fairly insignificant compared to the social media hit you might take if you were to deny such a request. Graduate entrance exams are being waived to accommodate the inability of prospective students to take the exam. ETS, Educational Testing Service, has opened online test taking for both the GRE and TOEFL. And meanwhile, the Graduate Management Admissions Council is providing an online proctored GMAT option. Now, both the Law School Admission Council and the Association of Medical Colleges who administer the LSAT and the MCAT respectively have issued statements about testing. They have not provided for an online option at this time, at least at the time that this webinar content was prepared. So you might want to go ahead and check out their websites to see if their statements have been modified to prevent for remote testing options. Conditional admission based on self-report admission, self-reported data. So some institutions have instated conditional admission based on self-reported data, basically the data that is coming through on the application form itself without supporting credentials. Now, I will note that admission policy has to be pretty clear here that the reported data you're getting on the application, if any of that reported data does not align with official credentials once you receive them, that is grounds for the admission to be rescinded and grounds for dismissal if the student has actually begun classes. In grad, a lot of us have shifted toward holistic admission. So making an admission decision based purely on data reported on an application form in some cases isn't possible. For some programs though, and for some institutions, information provided on the application can be used to make an admission decision with knowledge that the supporting credentials are coming later. Even a prerequisite checklist can be provided as part of a supplemental form that allows the student to attest as to whether or not they have taken the prerequisites and received passing grades or acceptable grades for admission. So while there does seem to be some risk associated with this policy, note that institutions that have provided for admission based on self-reported data as part of their standard admissions process have not reported increased instances of inaccurate or fraudulent reporting. All right, so these are some of the changes that we're seeing with admissions process. Let's take a look and see what we're looking at in terms of virtual connection, as the response among institutions has also been focused in this area. And this is where I personally get very excited about some of the possibilities, not only because of the work that Capture does as a company, because we're all about virtual connection, but also because institutions are experimenting and innovating in ways that they likely have not done in quite a while, if ever. So let's take a look at what some institutions are implementing in terms of virtual connection. And you will see a theme here that relies heavily on technology. So use of a live chat widget to respond to questions and concerns. Real-time chat isn't necessarily anything new. Folks have had this implemented for quite a while. Some have sunset it because it just didn't seem to be used quite often. But we're seeing quite the resurgence of real-time chat and the use of it in a bit more of an innovative way, with the scheduling of real-time chat conversations so that they incorporate not only many of the folks who are listening today who are graduate recruiters or graduate admissions counselors, but also graduate faculty members and current students being involved in scheduled real-time chat opportunities. Online information sessions. Again, these are not necessarily new. These are more formalized webinar sessions that can mix content that has been pre-recorded while also including content presented live. What has been new is seeing the way in which the online information session has been expanded beyond just, hey, come online and learn about our program or learn about how to get admitted into our graduate program, and instead leveraging faculty as subject matter experts within the discipline and having mini lectures on special topics within the field. Not only provides value and connection for the prospective student, allows them to learn something new in a field they're clearly interested in, but also previews a little bit about what life might actually be like as a student at the institution. Video calls. Video calls are great for information sharing. These are being used for meetings with individual prospective students and even in committee format for applicant interviews. So a lot of use of things like Zoom and other video conferencing capabilities. Virtual campus tours. If you have a virtual tour that was prepared by a professional, that is great. If not, and I would venture to say, even if you do, I would encourage you to do what we're seeing many other colleges and graduate programs do at this time, and that's arm yourself with your smartphone and record video of the various locations on campus you would typically highlight as part of your tour. I should provide a disclaimer here that you should be sure to follow all state and local guidelines as it relates to physical distancing and safe at home mandates. But this is an opportunity to come across as authentic, to deliver authenticity through this content, and really attempt to make that virtual connection via that authenticity. Email and voice calls are tried and true outreach methods. Prospective students rate email as the preferred way to convey information and updates. Phone calls, though, I should caution, really should be reactive right now, or used only in the communication of a critical update. In other words, now may be a good time to shelve your call campaign and look for an alternative method to communicate that message. Feedback that we are hearing from graduate students, prospective graduate students, is that now is not the time to really be taking calls, though I should point out that these calls, while not proactive, should still be reactive. You should be returning calls as quickly as possible. But in terms of your more proactive outreach campaigns where phone calls have been a factor, it would be a good time to shelve those at this point and go to a different outreach method. Dynamic content and marketing automation. So technology, much like Capture's marketing automation software, can measure 100% of all the visits to an institution's website, including those made by prospective graduate students. So these visits can trigger content to display to prospective graduate students based on any number of attributes about them. So it could be the location of where they're accessing your website, particular behaviors that they're demonstrating online on your website, any interests that they're demonstrating based on the types of content they're consuming. This type of technology has allowed some institutions, like many of our partners, to be able to message directly in an automated way while also identifying stealth graduate interest.
Jack, what stands out to me in all the information you just described is the experimentation, the trying of new things, new ways to engage. I think it'll be really interesting to see what remains after after all of us head back to our offices. I'm thinking of some institutions that are using innovative podcasts with faculty to showcase a bit more of their human side, less of the buttoned up academic side. And those have been really well received. Things like that just may stick around.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope. I would certainly anticipate that a lot of the things that we're doing right now will stick around. The thing I would caution folks to be aware of, by all means, try new things. If ever you were going to get a pass on things like poor production values, now would be that time. Just be sure to measure effectiveness. Otherwise, if you're not measuring what it is you're doing, then you're flying pretty blind. So be sure to measure effectiveness. And a quick note I just want to mention on measurement. So now as the whole country, the whole world is shifting to remote, I do want to point out that one of the things that we've been able to do as a company over the years is measure over 50 million unique virtual engagements. Measuring virtual engagements is what we do. It's the core of Capture as a company. And I mention this because I just want to be clear that I think this positions us to be able to provide suggestions and recommendations on how best to engage right now. And that's really what I want to shift to is what is it that we're recommending based on not only what we're seeing institutions do as a response, but how students are responding in turn. So in a remote world, some of those things that have historically been best practices remain best practices, but can be a bit more difficult due to just the nature of remote work. So let's review 4 key recommendations and then dive into each one. Number 1 recommendation, speed to lead. That continues to be paramount in terms of graduate prospect engagement. Number 2, automation, really trying to make things easier on you, on your teams right now. Number 3, personalization. More than ever, a personalized, meaningful connection matters. So personalization remains key. And number 4, creating and measuring meaningful engagement. And I'm going to provide a bit more of a deeper dive in that here in a moment. But let's get started by looking at speed to lead a bit more closely in terms of the recommendations. So in short, continue your speed to lead efforts, be they rapid email or phone or text response. If you were not focused on speed to lead before, I highly recommend that you get focused. 61% of online graduate students reward the institution they hear from first by enrolling with them. 61%. That research comes to us from Carol Islanian from the Islanian Group. And if that's what's happening for online grad students, then that's also a key influencer in terms of on-ground graduate students as well. The other thing I would mention here is people are at home. So if you take out commuting times, if you take out just the office chatter, right, the office talk that we all get involved with, if you're taking away these other in-office distractions, remote workers tend to be far more productive than they actually are in the office. And this actually is of benefit to a lot of remote workers because a lot of us are also managing our kids being home and our spouses being home and all this time with the dog. So we really could use these kind of productive moments. When you couple this with fewer happy hours and other things that are after work social activities, people have more time. So even in times like these, as human beings, it's part of the human condition, we think about our future. We turn to education as a way to help shape the future that we ultimately desire. So don't let remote work stop the critical touch points of email, phone, and even text, because people are reaching out to begin to prepare for what the future looks like. And graduate education can be a big piece of that. Automate, automate, automate. Look, you can't do this work by yourself. Speed to lead requires innovation. It requires automation. And technology, therefore, has never been more of a friend to us than it is right now. So leverage your CRM, leverage marketing automation tools. In these automated messages, be sure to provide clear information as to when more information is coming, how it is coming, and if and when an actual human will be in touch.
Jack, I think that's a really good point as you talk about the human touch, because the technology shouldn't just replace the human connection. It's really there to support it. As I think of the automation that we work in, the goal is really to establish an emotional connection between the prospect and the university.
Yeah, I mean, we like to think, I think particularly in graduate enrollment, um, that the decision of where to enroll is a really highly logical and well thought out decision. And to some extent it is, but as with most major decisions we make as human beings, our decision center is awash with emotion. I'm kind of channeling Simon Sinek, who I'm sure many people have heard of as a thought leader in management and leadership, but also how we go about kind of the product adoption process. And it is a wash in emotion, and the decision of where to enroll is no different. This is why one of the things that I'm going to kind of pivot back off my tangent here, but one of the things that I encourage exploring here is a managed service partner. Um, I mean, you will likely need new tools, or at the very least, be better able to use the tools that you have. And companies that provide managed service are super helpful because they free you from having to create and implement the work. So this frees you as a counselor to really be doing those things that matter most, which is to focus on that relationship between you and the prospective student. So whether it's your CRM tool or other types of technology services that you're using, lessen the burden on yourself and your remote teams by exploring those options with companies that do provide for managed service. Personalize your outreach. The information that we get, all that information that goes into our CRM, that we can report on and get all kinds of wonderful analytics on, all of that data, those are real people, right? Your data is a person. And kind of bringing back to speed to lead here, they desire rapid and personalized response. No one wants to give you a bunch of information about themselves and then have you not use it, right? It's important that the connections be personalized and that the data be customized. A lot of us have tools that already allow us to do that. We're leveraging them. We're personalizing emails. We're using personalized landing pages, those pearls, if you will, personalized URLs. We're like personalizing digital advertising through social networks or with web retargeting. We're doing a lot of this work. If not, we should be. And even more than that, it would be really helpful to customize and personalize the actual content of your interactions. Not everyone is interested in the same thing. Not everyone at this moment in time is receptive to the message that we would typically have going out automatically out of our CRMs. So any tool that you can get that allows you to customize content and make that more personalized, that's super helpful. Personalization accounts for 6 times more transactions than static outreach. That's a big deal when it comes to conversion and yield. All right, creating and measuring meaningful engagement. This is the area where we really kind of get into capture land, again, because this is what we as a company specialize in. This is what we've been doing for 8 years. This is what I and my colleagues spend our days doing and working on. So I want to spend some time in the slides ahead here to make this a bit more tangible. One of the things that I hear often when we talk about things like meaningful engagement is, well, what do you mean by meaningful engagement? If I don't know what you mean by meaningful engagement, how do I know how to measure it? What do you mean by things like behavioral intelligence and using those things? So I want to spend some time here to make this more tangible. And really, whether you're a current partner, I know we have quite a few current partners listening today, or whether you're someone who's exploring what needs to be done during all of this, I think this will all make quite a bit more sense here in a moment. What we're really talking about in terms of meaningful engagement right now is measuring meaningful engagement that is virtual engagement, right? Most of us are not having students show up on campus. Most all of us are at home. So we need to be able to measure virtual engagement. We have certain ways that we typically do measure these things, things that we're used to, like email open rates, the click-through stats of our digital advertising campaigns. And those are really nice ways to start, but there are so many other deeper ways that you can measure virtual engagement. And a lot of that comes through this concept of behavioral intelligence. I want to make sure that there is no misunderstanding about what exactly behavioral intelligence is. So I'm doing something that I typically am not a fan of, which is placing a lot of text on a slide and then driving it home by reading that text. But this is how important I feel that this is. So to be clear, behavioral intelligence capture solves for one of the most important challenges today, and that is the fit between the prospective student and the institution. That need to create personalized, relevant engagement, particularly right now in a virtual world, is immediate. And we need to address the emotional and intellectual connection associated with pursuing a graduate credential. This comes back to that concept of emotionally how we make decisions on where we're going to enroll. We believe at Capture that every interaction needs to be relevant, that every interaction should be personalized, that it should be measured. Our enrollment experts at the company, who I work side by side with now for years, are ardent believers in the behavioral intelligence platform. We are using it ourselves with a bunch of other services to achieve enrollment results for our partners as a managed service. We leverage the Engage software, which is our marketing automation solution for higher education. And the great thing in terms of how all this works together is about the idea that through behavioral intelligence, you are generating profiles of your prospective students based on the information that they are telling you via their web-based virtual engagement with you as an institution. All right, so that kind of explains what everything is. It is not necessarily tangible yet, so I'm going to show you an example of what one of these profiles would look like. Kevin, surprise, I think you might know who this guy is.
Love it. Thanks for bringing me in, Jack.
Hey, you got it. All right, so an Engage prospect profile provides this level of insight. Engage measures the prospect's engagement virtually with you, knows when and for how long the prospect has been engaged, knows the information most important to that prospect overall, provides for prospective student overall engagement level based on scores, engagement scores, that provide insights as to how likely that individual is to apply and how likely that individual is to enroll. Let me put this in context. Engage can share who is viewing your content. Right now, we are seeing from our partners that it is the COVID content, how you're responding, the messages that you're making that are resonating most. So you can actually see who is viewing that content, who is increasing their engagement with you virtually, whose engagement is declining, who you should be engaging with, when, via what method of outreach, and with what message. So for example, if you see that someone is clearly visiting information on graduate assistantships, then it would make sense for you to communicate to them in your next outreach the deadline for those assistantship applications, whether or not they've been pushed back because of the current situation that we find ourselves in. So personalizing the message is the way in which we're cultivating that relationship and that emotional connection. All right, so everything that we have discussed here today, you can do. You already have the tools you need to implement these recommendations. You might be exploring upgrades to the technological solutions you have at your disposal, but you have methods based on the recommendations that we've provided and based on what we're seeing at other institutions for you and your teams to continue your recruitment and enrollment work. If you have questions about the solutions that other institutions are implementing, about the 4 key recommendations that I'm supplying with you with today, I'm happy to answer those questions for you. My email address is here, my phone number is here. Whether you're a partner or not, it doesn't matter. I'm happy to talk with you and brainstorm. If you want to learn more about behavioral intelligence in particular and how you should be measuring that virtual engagement, also email me. I can hop on and do a virtual simulation for you. It doesn't take long at all. I'll recap here because I know we're up against it with just 1 point from each of the recommendations that we've provided today. 61% of your graduate prospects enroll at the institution they hear from first. Use technology to automate responses to the actions made by your prospective students. Personalize your messaging. It is rewarded with 6 times greater transactions. That is a huge deal when it comes to application, engagement, and yield. Leverage behavioral intelligence wherever possible with whatever tools you have to establish and cultivate that emotional connection with your prospective students. Remember that that decision to enroll in your program at your institution is ultimately an emotional one, so meet your graduate prospects where they are. Kevin, I am going to shut up.
Jack, I will say that this has been a lot of great information. So thanks for collecting it and sharing it with the audience today. I know you'll continue to monitor all that's happening in the graduate landscape, and I'll encourage our audience to continue to keep in touch. Reach out to Jack with any questions that you have, but also look for updates on Capture's blog and the podcast. And I will just remind our audience that there are some great resources currently available via that podcast